When I opened the envelope, I thought it was a Christmas card. But what I pulled out felt like the end of my life. I still remember that morning, the smell of pine needles, the faint hum of Erin's voice in the kitchen, the sound of our old kettle whistling on the stove. We'd been arguing less lately. Or maybe we were just talking less. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. Marriage has a way of going quiet before it falls apart. It was early December. One of those soft, gray mornings where the sky looks like it's holding back snow. I'd just finished wrapping a box of wool socks for Erin's mother, Sylvia, a small peace offering. She'd never liked me much. But every year I tried. This time, she'd gone out of her way to make it easy. A cream-colored envelope had arrived 2 days before, embossed with gold lettering and her unmistakable cursive. The Holloway family Christmas at the lake house. That house had been in their family for decades. I'd only been there twice. Once when Erin and I got engaged, and once the year after, when Sylvia spent half the dinner reminding everyone that some people just aren't cut out for small-town life. She'd said it sweetly, with that smile that never quite reached her eyes. Still, I told Erin we should go. Maybe this year would be different. He'd been distant lately. Tired, distracted. I thought maybe his mother's invitation was a good sign, a chance to bridge things, to start fresh. So I wrote back, "We'll be there." That night, I sat by the window with a cup of peppermint tea and watched the snow begin to fall. Our Christmas lights blinked softly against the dark. I remember feeling something I hadn't in a while, hope. The kind of hope that creeps up on you when you've convinced yourself you're done trying. The days leading up to the trip passed in a blur. I baked cookies, packed our coats, even ironed the red sweater Erin liked so much. He barely noticed. He'd been coming home later from work, mumbling about year-end reports and deadlines. I tried not to pry. Every time I asked if something was wrong, he'd sigh and say, "Not now, Eve." But on the drive to the lake house, I caught him staring out the window for miles, his jaw tight. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore, it was hollow. "Are you nervous to see your mom?" I asked gently. He blinked, as if snapping out of a trance. "She's just set in her ways," he said. "Don't take anything she says too seriously this time, okay?" I nodded, pretending I wasn't already bracing myself. When we arrived, the house looked like something out of a magazine. Wreaths hung from every window, the porch lights glowing warm against the snow. Sylvia greeted us at the door, perfectly composed in her red turtleneck and pearls, like she'd stepped out of a Christmas card herself. "Evelyn," she said, her voice smooth as ever. "You look... well, it was always... well, never good." And to Erin, she beamed. "My darling boy, you must be exhausted. Come in, come in." Inside, the smell of roasted chestnuts and cinnamon filled the air. The tree sparkled in the corner, gifts already piled beneath it, in neat, color-coordinated wrapping. I noticed right away none of them had my name on them. Dinner was polite, stiff. Sylvia talked about her book club, about the neighbors, about Erin's promotion at work, a detail I hadn't heard before. I turned to him, startled, but he avoided my eyes. When dessert came, she poured herself a small glass of sherry and said, "Erin, why don't you help me bring in the extra gifts from the study?" I started to stand, but she touched my shoulder lightly. "Oh no, dear. You stay. You look tired." The moment they left, the silence of the room pressed in. I could hear faint murmurs from down the hall, Erin's low voice, then Sylvia's crisp, clipped tone. I didn't catch words, just rhythm like they'd rehearsed something. When they came back, Erin's face was pale. He sat beside me, and Sylvia placed a gold box on my lap, her smile poised. "Merry Christmas, Evelyn," she said softly. "This one's just for you." The wrapping paper shimmered in the firelight. I smiled, grateful, until I lifted the lid and saw the plain manila envelope inside. No card, no note, just a stack of legal papers, neatly clipped. "Divorce papers," filed by Erin Holloway. My breath caught. The world seemed to tilt. Sylvia's voice was calm, almost kind. "It's best to get these things handled before the new year, dear. Fresh start, you know." Erin didn't look at me. Not once. For a long moment, all I could hear was the crackle of the fire and the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Erin?" He swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the table. "It's been coming for a while, Eve. We both know it." "No," I said, shaking my head, my voice trembling. "I don't know that." Sylvia stood, smoothing the front of her sweater. "I'll give you two a moment," she said, her tone almost tender, the way you'd speak to a wounded animal. The door clicked behind her. I looked at my husband, and saw a stranger. The tears didn't come right away. Shock has a strange stillness to it. I stared at the papers, at the neat black text that somehow summarized 10 years of my life, and I thought of all the ways I had tried to belong. The Sunday dinners, the family trips, the carefully chosen gifts. Every time I'd smiled through her cutting remarks, every time I'd told myself that love was worth the work. And now, here I was handed a divorce under the Christmas tree. Aaron finally looked at me then. His eyes were glassy, distant. I didn't want it to happen like this, he said quietly. But Mom thought, I repeated, my voice cracking. And what did you think, Aaron? He didn't answer. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, endless, and quiet. The kind of quiet that follows something breaking. The silence between us was thicker than the fog curling through the pine trees. The old road wound its way up the hill like a ribbon of gray silk. And when the house came into view, I swear my chest tightened. The Holloway lake house looked exactly as I remembered, regal, cold, and far too quiet for December. Sylvia stood on the porch, wrapped in a cream wool coat, her lipstick the exact shade of hollyberries. She smiled when she saw Aaron. Not me, just him. Darling, she said, her voice like polished silver. You made it. Aaron smiled faintly and stepped forward, hugging her. I followed behind, clutching a tin of cookies I'd baked the night before. Sylvia's gaze slid over to me, polite but distant. Evelyn, she said with that same smile. Still baking, I see. I forced a laugh. Well, someone has to keep the Christmas spirit alive. She tilted her head slightly. Of course. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon, cedar, and something colder, like memory. The walls were lined with family portraits, all of them perfectly framed. Every photo seemed to echo a past I didn't belong to. We settled into the guest room, the same one we'd stayed in years ago, when we were still newlyweds. Aaron placed his suitcase by the door and immediately checked his phone. You okay? I asked. He didn't look up. Yeah, just work stuff. That was always his answer. Work. I almost believed him. Later that evening, we sat by the fire. Sylvia handed out mugs of mulled wine and commented on the snowstorm brewing outside. Her voice filled the room, calm and commanding. Aaron and his sister, Lydia, laughed about childhood memories. I tried to join in, but I could feel Sylvia watching me, as if measuring every word I said. After dinner, she invited Aaron to help her with something in the study. The two of them disappeared for almost an hour. When they came back, Aaron's face looked pale, his expression unreadable. I asked what they'd been talking about, but he brushed me off again. Nothing important, he said. I wanted to believe him until I noticed the faint smear of red lipstick on his collar. Sylvia's shade. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind howled against the windows, and the branches scraped the glass like restless hands. I got up quietly and walked down the hall. I could hear muffled voices coming from the study. Aaron's voice, Sylvia's voice, my name. I leaned closer. She deserves to know, Aaron said softly. She'll find out soon enough, Sylvia replied. But it has to come from me. My heart started pounding. Come from her? Find out what? The next morning, the house was bright with sunlight and laughter. Sylvia hummed in the kitchen as she arranged gifts beneath the tree. She looked up at me and smiled warmly. Evelyn, dear, she said. Before we open presents, I have something for you. She handed me a red envelope, thick, heavy, sealed with gold wax. Everyone watched as I opened it. Inside wasn't a cut. It was a stack of legal papers. At the top, in bold print, it read, Petition for dissolution of marriage. And beneath that, Aaron's signature. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The words on that paper blurred as my pulse roared in my ears. My fingers trembled, clutching the edges until they crumpled around me. The room fell into a heavy silence. Even the crackling fire seemed to stop. I whispered, looking up at him. What is this? He didn't meet my eyes. His jaw tightened, his hand clenched on his knee. Sylvia, however, sat perfectly still, sipping her tea as if she'd just gifted me a scented candle instead of divorce papers. I thought you should have time to process, she said softly, her tone almost maternal. Aaron's been meaning to talk to you, but you know how he avoids conflict. My mouth fell open. Meaning to talk to me? I repeated, my voice rising. About ending our marriage? Aaron finally looked at me. His eyes were glassy, full of regret but also relief. That hurt more than the papers in my hands. Evelyn, he started. It's not what it looks like. Not what it looks like? I cut in, shaking my head. Your mother just handed me divorce papers like a Christmas gift? Aaron, how could this possibly look like anything else? Sylvia set her cup down gently. Evelyn, dear, emotions won't help here. These matters are best handled calmly. Calmly? I turned toward her, heat rising in my chest. You ambushed me. In your house. On Christmas. Her lips curved into that perfectly composed smile. The one she used at charity events and dinner parties. You always did have a flair for drama. Aaron stood abruptly. That's enough, Mom. But the words sounded hollow. He wasn't defending me. He was just trying to contain the explosion. I felt the room tilt. The lights on the tree blurred into tiny orbs of pain. I walked toward the window, gripping the sill, trying to steady myself. Outside, the lake was frozen over, still and silent, just like my marriage. Behind me, I heard Sylvia sigh. You'll thank me one day, Evelyn. Better now than years from now when resentment's all that's left. I turned around slowly. You mean your resentment? You've never forgiven me for taking him away from this house, have you? She didn't answer, but her eyes said everything. I left the room before I said something I couldn't take back. Upstairs, I locked the door and sank onto the edge of the bed. The papers lay beside me, the weight of betrayal heavier than anything I'd ever felt. Aaron knocked softly an hour later. Evie, can we talk? I didn't respond. He sighed and leaned against the door. I didn't mean for it to happen like that. Mom was supposed to wait. Wait for what? I said through the door. To ruin Christmas or my life? Please, he said. Can we just... Did you sign them? I interrupted. Silence. That was my answer. When I finally opened the door, he was sitting on the floor, head in his hands. For the first time in our 7 years together, he looked small, like a boy caught in the middle of a storm he'd created, but didn't know how to escape. Why, Aaron? I asked quietly. Was it something I did? He looked up, eyes red. It's not you. It's just, we've been growing apart. And Mom kept saying maybe I should think about what I really want. I laughed bitterly. And what did you decide? That what you really want is her approval? He didn't answer. Outside, the snow kept falling thick, relentless, muffling everything. I realized then that no matter how much love I had poured into this marriage, I was always the outsider in Sylvia Holloway's home, and maybe in Aaron's heart too. That night, I packed my bag. When I came downstairs, Sylvia was by the fire again, humming carols softly, her face glowing in the flicker of the flames. She didn't look surprised to see me. Leaving already? She asked. It's Christmas morning. I stopped at the door. You got what you wanted, Sylvia. Congratulations. She tilted her head. You make it sound like this was personal. I turned to face her fully. It always was. I walked out into the snow without another word. Behind me, I heard Aaron call my name once. Twice. But I didn't stop. The cold bit through my gloves. But it was nothing compared to the freeze settling inside my chest. By the time I reached my car, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of taking my life back. The drive back to our apartment was silent, the snowflakes swirling against the windshield like scattered hopes. Aaron didn't say a word. Neither did I. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the shattering scene that had unfolded just hours ago. At home, I sat on the couch, staring at the divorce papers. The ink felt like ice beneath my fingers. I remembered how we once dreamed together late-night talks about a future filled with laughter, love, and family traditions. Now, those dreams were folded away, like the cruel legal documents before me. I called my best friend, Maya. Her voice was warm, a lifeline in the cold storm of my thoughts. You're not alone, Evie, she said softly. You deserve better than this. Don't let them define your worth. Maya's words stirred something inside me, an ember of strength I thought had died. The next days were a blur of phone calls to lawyers, quiet tears, and moments of fierce determination. I couldn't let Sylvia's manipulation and Aaron's silence break me. This was my life, my story. Family and friends started to notice the tension. At work, I felt the weight of silent questions and sympathetic glances. But I held my head high, refusing to crumble. One afternoon, I found a message from Sylvia on my phone. An apology, thinly veiled with condescension. I only want what's best for our family, she wrote. I smiled bitterly. The only thing she wanted was control. And so, I made a decision. I would fight not just for my marriage, but for my self-respect and peace. This holiday betrayal would not define me. The days following Christmas felt like wading through thick fog. I was caught between heartbreak and a fierce determination to reclaim my life. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, the divorce papers spread out before me like a battlefield map. Each word seemed to mock me, but I wasn't ready to surrender. I reached out to a family lawyer, recommended by Maya, someone who understood the tangled emotions behind legal battles. His calm, measured voice was a stark contrast to the chaos in my mind. "Evelyn," he said, "this isn't just about paperwork. It's about protecting your rights, your dignity. We'll take this step by step." The first step was gathering proof texts, emails, any evidence of Aaron's intentions and Sylvia's manipulations. I spent hours scrolling through old messages, piecing together a narrative that would stand in court. It hurt, reliving every painful moment, but it was necessary. At home, Aaron avoided me. His silence was deafening. One evening, I confronted him. "Why didn't you talk to me? Why let this happen like this?" My voice cracked. He looked tired, defeated. "I was scared, Grace. Scared of disappointing Mom. Scared of losing everything." "Did you ever think about how I would feel? About losing everything with you?" I demanded. He had no answer. The court dates came. I sat through hearings, feeling the sterile courtroom walls close in around me. But each time I stood up and spoke my truth, a little of the weight lifted. Outside the courtroom, I found unexpected support friends who reminded me of my worth. Family members who believed in my strength. Even Aaron's sister, Lydia, reached out quietly, sharing her own struggles with their mother's controlling ways. I realized then that this wasn't just my fight. It was a battle against a pattern of control and silence that had hurt too many. Through it all, I held on to one thing: hope. Hope that I could emerge from this darkness stronger, with my heart and spirit intact. News travels fast in small towns, especially when it involves a family like the Holloways. Word of our battle quietly at first began to seep out, not through gossip or malicious rumors, but through hushed conversations at the local bakery, sympathetic glances from neighbors, and the cautious way people approached me at work. Sylvia's carefully maintained reputation started to crack. The woman who once hosted elegant charity dinners and flawlessly curated her public image now faced the whispers of those who had seen a different side, a side too many had quietly endured. At a community holiday event, I overheard a conversation between two women. "Did you hear? Sylvia Holloway handed her daughter-in-law divorce papers for Christmas. Can you imagine? Such coldness. I always thought she was charming." But the voice trailed off, heavy with unspoken judgment. For the first time, I didn't feel isolated. There was a quiet wave of solidarity building beneath the surface. Aaron's friends and colleagues began to distance themselves, uncomfortable with the scandal. I saw the shame flicker in Aaron's eyes, a mixture of regret and guilt that no longer found refuge behind silence. Lydia, Aaron's sister, became an unexpected ally. One afternoon, over coffee, she confided, "Mom's always been controlling. But this was cruel. I'm sorry you had to go through it." Her words felt like a balm to my bruised heart. Even within that fractured family, there was room for empathy. Sylvia herself faced consequences beyond public judgment. Several of her charity boards and social clubs began to question her leadership. Invitations stopped coming. The icy veneer she'd built was melting, exposing a loneliness she had long tried to hide behind power. I didn't celebrate her downfall. That wasn't who I was. But I did feel a sense of justice settling, slow and steady like the snowfall outside. In the end, it wasn't about punishment. It was about truth coming to light, and the quiet strength of standing tall when others tried to push you down. Spring came slowly that year, like a hesitant promise. The snow melted away, leaving the earth soft and ready for new beginnings. And so was I. After the final court hearing, the divorce was settled. It wasn't the ending I had hoped for, but it was a closing chapter, one that allowed me to step forward on my own terms. Aaron and I parted quietly, carrying the weight of what we once had, but no longer bound by it. I found strength in the small things: morning coffees on my balcony, the scent of fresh rain, the way the sunlight filtered through the curtains. I began to reconnect with myself, rediscovering dreams and desires that had been buried under years of compromise and heartbreak. Friends rallied around me, their laughter and support weaving a safety net I hadn't realized I needed so badly. Maya, especially, never let me forget my worth. "You are more than this," she'd say, squeezing my hand during our long talks. And slowly, I forgave. Not Sylvia, not Aaron, but myself for holding on to hope when I shouldn't have. For believing that love could conquer all. Forgiveness was my gift to me, a way to release the bitterness that threatened to consume me. I started volunteering at a local women's center, sharing my story when asked. My journey from betrayal to healing resonated with others, reminding me that I was not alone, and neither were they. One evening, as I sat by the window watching the sunset paint the sky, I felt a quiet peace settle in my chest. Life had broken me, yes, but it had also taught me resilience, dignity, and the power of self-love. This story isn't about a perfect ending. It's about survival, about finding light in the darkest moments, and about choosing yourself when others try to write your story for you. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but sometimes speaking our truths is the first step toward healing. I've learned that betrayal doesn't have to define us. We have the power to reclaim our lives, to forgive not for others, but for ourselves, and to find peace even after the storm. Now, I want to ask you, have you ever faced a moment where someone you trusted turned your world upside down? How did you find your way back? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments. If my story touched you, please consider subscribing and supporting this channel. We're here to share real stories, real emotions, and real strength together. Remember, you are not alone.